Day 15 of the Gratitude Story Project, Turtles All the Way Down. Beloit College. Well, it was the hardest transition I have ever gone through. Probably because it was a wallop of FFTs, or effing first times. If you don't know what FFTs are, check out the first episode of Brene Brown's Unlocking Us podcast. I'm definitely not the only person who's learned the most from a job I wasn't really prepared or meant for. Although being an area hall director was likely the loneliest and most challenging thing I've ever done, all these years later, it isn't regret, but a complicated cocktail of feelings for the lessons, skills, and relationships I gained from my time working in housing at Beloit College, which is really where I grew up. Graduating from Western to work at Beloit meant moving across the country and starting a community from scratch for the first time. My first full-time job, first time supervising anyone, which meant a whole host of other first-time things like running a meeting, training people, budgeting, administrative work. And I walked into a staff of 16 wonderful RAs, some of whom were older than me, and 8 student union workers. In a small city, in the middle of nowhere, across the country from my friends, with my nearest friend 3 hours drive away. Beloit is such a unique, uber progressive campus too. Its small size meant that any decision could have major ripples across campus, something new to me coming from Western student population of 15,000. I was a bull in a china shop. It was the sharpest learning curve I've ever experienced on personal and professional levels, and my first time really experiencing culture shock. I didn't have the skills to recognize I was experiencing shame, imposter syndrome, and clinical depression and anxiety. If I could go back and talk to that 21-year-old who was terrified, a know-it-all, shaking with a clipboard in her hand, standing before 16 RAs, realizing she'd never run a meeting before, oh, there's so much I wish I could give her. I'd sit us down for tea, and I'd give her a hug and a list of therapists. I'd remind her that Chendu had 10 years of experience and different talents, but that hers were valid. That her teammates, Sarah and Mike, were just as stressed, just about different things, and that she wasn't a piece of shit for not having the same experience they did. That yes, maybe her RAs could have benefited from having a supervisor with more experience, but they didn't get a dud of a human being because she'd always care and want to do better. That eventually she'd find her unique way of doing things and it would be just fine. I'd also tell myself to shut the hell up and listen to Christina Erickson and Bianca, Barack, and Bonnie because they knew what they were doing way more than I did, and they were such a gift. Honestly, they deserve an award for how patient they were with me. Basically, it sucks to suck. That's why when I talk to students about their first job after college, I often ask, well, what's something you're willing to suck at for a while? Because you will. And after a while, you get better. And it did get better. I felt so lucky that I got to be an advisor for Beloit Student Council. That was in my wheelhouse. I got to advise the students and be in a small group where we really came together. I wasn't a supervisor. Also getting to spend more time with Sarah, venting with her and Benny in her apartment, or celebrating Thanksgiving with her family. I got to know her better. Or getting to know Jen Walsh and her amazing wisdom and mentorship in student affairs. She literally spent hours with me editing my terrible graduate application essays. Eventually, Mike and I built a begrudging tolerance and respect for each other that always cracked me up. Or crashing on Amber's couch all the time to process life and binge watch TV while we curled up with her cats got me through. And John was always willing to offer a listening ear amidst his sea of paperwork and meetings. With more distance from our time in Beloit, I like getting to know who each of us are outside of those roles. My favorite part of that first year was what I already knew how to do. My one-on-ones with the RAs and going out of my way to get to know them. These brilliant, kind, quirky, passionate, brave student leaders kept me inspired, accountable, and laughing all the time. It turns out having study parties or game nights in your apartment will always have a certain magic about it. The biggest difference between that first and second year was getting to select my own staff, and John asking me to start Beloit Aid to educate students on what responsible drug and alcohol use could look like. But having a head RA and team that just clicked, it was everything. With a fresh start, Superiority Complex went all in together and became a loving bunch of hardworking goofballs. It was vulnerable and wonderful and just felt right. Our meetings and one-on-ones kept me going through the intense conduct cases that came up that year. Having Justine as a head RA, though, easily the best memory I have from Beloit. She was my sweet soft spot who made Beloit start to feel like home, not just a place where I had a job. I hope somehow she knows what it meant to me when she asked to grab a beer for our one-on-ones, or wanted to just hang out and spend time together, not because she had to during her busy last semester. We laughed so hard over puns and meandering conversations where she'd slowly let me get closer and closer, right up until her graduation. There was no manual or training that could have prepared me for Justine's death. Mike and Amber holding me as I crumpled in my living room. We made a plan to tell all the RAs coming for winter training the next morning. Listening to John's voice break as he told all the RAs about the accident with Raquel and Justine was one thing. But there was no level of facilitation skills or supervising experience that would have made running that staff meeting any easier. And somehow we found a way to get through it. Through those months, those years. Speaking at her memorial, spreading her ashes at the top of Tabletop Mountain in South Africa, when I catch up with her every January over a beer and a candle on everything that's going on in my life. And I wonder what she would have thought of it, like when I played saxophone for the graduating seniors at Beloit, something I never thought I'd do. Or what she'd think about me coming out several years later. The cycle of grief is never ending, but that's kind of the point. The meaning that I took away from my relationship with Justine, her passing, and my entire experience at Beloit changes and morphs over time. It wasn't a job I was ready for, but it made me ready for so much more than I could have imagined for the rest of my life and career. It takes a lot to scare or overwhelm me after working as an area hall director. I'm so grateful and proud of the students that I got to work with and know. And that's why, forever and always, turtles all the way down.